Tell me more about your work because it's fascinating that you have your platform, and obviously there's a lot of interest, and people are very engaged, I would imagine, in these water issues. But it's getting very political because what you're suggesting and folks are asking for is that this be a publicly elected a group of accountable individuals in charge of your agencies.
Well, I think that's what people probably think is already there, but it's not. So these umbrella agencies, the biggest wholesalers in Southern California, first of all, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, that's one of the biggest in the country. And then the second biggest, much smaller, but still big, for San Diego County is the San Diego County Water Authority. So they have representatives who are appointed by their member agencies. They're not elected they're elected or sometimes appointed locally, but they can be like any let's say Padre Dam Municipal Water District of San Diego County. Okay, they could appoint. They do appoint someone from their. Actually, they appointed their general manager to sit on there. Okay, doesn't have to be someone who was elected on their council either. It could be anybody. It could be some political hack or whatever. And, they happen to have a good representative on there, just to be clear. But so all these people, the 38 members and 26 or whatever, I can't remember, on board members on Water Authority are appointed. They're appointed. Not only they're appointed, but their votes are weighted according to money, wealth, basically. And it's very complicated. And I had a poll about, should they be elected, directly elected, like a city council and so on, and with the districts and all that. I got a good response from that, but I just had another survey poll put out about, this the issue of weighting based on property value and so on, and how much water you buy and all that. And not a very good response because I think it was too complicated to explain. But basically, the more money you have, the more votes you get. You get the percentage of the total vote that's calculated somehow, and it's very confusing and all that. So it's about wealth. It's not one person, one vote. It's not equal protection under the 14th Amendment that led to things like the Voting Rights Act and so on, where groups, you have an equal number of people or more or less in different areas, but they're to the extent that you can, but you make sure that groups are represented too. It's not just rich people, or it's not just white people and so on, whatever, it's, and it's geographic issues and so on. So there's no discussion about that because, first of all, even the local water districts that emerged, I'm sure it's probably the same everywhere in California, but down here in Southern California, they came out of agricultural interests originally, and then that kind of started morphing more into developing the agricultural area, like Inland Empire area, San Diego County, and so on. Okay, so so that more. So these districts are really created by business people, by the developers and the landowners, and so on. And that's why, and so that some of them there's a whole bunch of different kinds of water districts. I can't even remember them all. You can read. I got a book, Dorothy Green is Managing Water. That she goes into all that. But the first time I got an introduction to water districts was when I had just been working as a labor organizer, and I was asked to help organize against the project you see behind me there, the Cadiz project, which is like it's like the guy in Friday the 13th. He keeps coming back in different iterations every few years. And they want to use the Mojave Desert for a water, store water and sell it, mostly to the Santa Margarita Water District in Southern California, in Orange County, but other to the Met and so on. And they're rearing their head up now. And we have a director on the water board at Metropolitan. The president of the board, Adán Ortega, has conflicts with that that industry or that developer, the Cadiz people and all that. And so anyway, so these were, people don't go to water board meetings very much. They do with certain issues like the proposed desalination project for Huntington Beach, which would have been along with one in Carlsbad, one of the two largest ocean desal plants in the country. Mm-hmm. And it would have been a $1.5 billion affair. And that got a lot of interest. I'm proud to say, partly because of my reporting, going way back 20 years, but also because of mainly the local people got involved in this. So I would tell people, come to the water board meeting and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. We tried to get video and all this stuff so people who couldn't come, because they arrange the meetings, you see, when it's inconvenient for people to come, generally speaking, and so there's all kinds of tricks of the trade that they have to keep it as private as possible. Mm-hmm. And they do not they're very arrogant, generally speaking. Yeah. They do not like it when people come and criticize them, and they don't like it at all. So this is the way things have, they were like fiefdoms, they become political fiefdoms. Yes. And a lot of water board directors stay on there until they're just too old to move anymore, and that's, so transparency is a big issue down here, but everything's so transactional, like at the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and so on. So you have this big, basically a scam project. The Carlsbad Ocean Desalination Project wasn't needed. It was well known during the course of the promotion of it in the early part of the 2000s and so on, that there would be other far less expensive sources of water, including, of course, conservation, the least expensive of all and the most productive. And that's what part of what Del Haj Khalil, the former general manager who was sacked about a year ago, he called that part of the fourth aqueduct, that through that wastewater recycling and so on, and sharing of local resources and inclusion and all that. Okay. So there's this whole state. There's two contrasting philosophies. There's the abundance philosophers who think that there's water resources are like a what do you call it? Perpetual motion machine or something like that, where they're always going to produce more and more and more and more, and we'll always have access to that. The amount of water, as you know, never changes, but our access to it does. Yes. Depending on how we use it and the climate and so on. Then there's others who now, in these days, conservationists, that's the number one source. So it's this, talk about a battle over the use of this water. And so my question to my approach is, are we doing what we can and should be doing for the future, a future based on the love of life and living on this planet and making it livable for our children, grandchildren, and so on? Yes. Are we doing enough for that? And no, we're not serious about that at all. And the other thing is, you do not assume that these people, you can call it, the term is water buffaloes, but that can be a criticizing manner, or it can be kind of affectionate. But they're at the trough there, that's for sure, and a lot of good benefits and extra cash and stuff like that, and stepping stones to higher political office. Yeah, and so they get away with a lot of things at these meetings that you wouldn't get away with at a city council meeting, because most of the time nobody's there except for people who have a particular interest. Yeah, but they don't realize how water affects. So my thing too is, now with the onset of what truly is a attempt at constructing a fascist regime in Washington, of mega fascism, and it needs to be called that right out in front. And now I think that's pretty. I don't even think they really deny it anymore very much. But how are we as water managers going to respond to that? Yes. And especially in California, where the president has a real antipathy towards California. So, and who is kind of this limousine liberal who wants to be seen as the champion of environment and the champion against the fascist beast in Washington. But he backtracks on a lot of those of his policies, as you probably know, and conservation. He backtracks on and we're going to meet the deadlines for fossil fuel, being free of fossil fuels and so on. And he does the same kind of thing in water. So how are we going to react? So you have these on these water boards, there's, I say, like roughly 50% who are very conservative. Many of them are outright mega supporters, or some maybe mega light or something. And then you have the progressives who, frankly, they are cowardly. They're cowardly to really. We just had a whole year go by where this progressive, game-changing general manager, Haj Khalil, was selected in that corrupt voting process we just talked about, because there was wheeling and dealing. The San Diego Water Authority, this is my analysis, okay? So this is my analysis, this part of it.
Sure.
The San Diego County Water Authority and Los Angeles, they have a lot of voting, the Department of Water, Los Angeles, they have a lot of sway there, and there are others and so on. It barely got, with this percentage voting system, this weighted voting system, they barely got Haj Khalil elected, or by them, to appointed as general manager, and free in 2021 in the summer. And but they tried to the old guard tried to keep him out. They tried to concoct some scandal and so on against him. That didn't work. And so it barely got in there, because San Diego Water wanted to make a good deal with the Met, the MWD, over all this, to end this feud they've been having that was largely instigated by San Diego County Water Authority after it got going. Originally, MWD cutting off their water supplies and all that. So this feud ensued for decades. It got very vicious, and it was detrimental, just to make a long story short. So they wanted to make this deal. So they were all for Haj Khalil, because they thought they'd get a better deal, to get out of this legal morass and get a settlement and so on. They finally got that with Adán Ortega, but they got that only after, later on, 3 years later, voting to sack Haj Khalil.
Oh.
After a investigation for, I'll just finish up real quick, and I know you got a question here.
No.
After an investigation of not sexual harassment, but workplace harassment made by an employee, the assistant general manager, who was connected to the Delta the tunnel, the conveyance project. She's one of its treasurer on that, and so and connected to the predecessor, Jeff Keitlinger, who is all for the Delta and Sites Reservoir and all that. So you have this this is really an inner political struggle. It resulted in an investigation which exonerated him, but still they fired him or without cause. And this whole thing was facilitated by Don Ortega, the board president, who violated the right to due process by both the accuser and the accused, and it's openly, in an outrageous violation of their admin code and state law, openly. And I wrote about this in depth, and you can see all that on there. And I'm not quite done with it, because there's a little more. So how could this guy, who's the facilitate all this, who was being sued by the alleged victim and another alleged victim of workplace harassment for denying them due process? Ironically, the assistant manager who said that her due process was violated actually violated her own due process by leaking a letter with all the accusations, and then that, knowing, I'm sure, that would be given to the press, because that's what happens at the MWD all the time, and that's what happened. It was in Politico and so on. So this is the atmosphere. How can you have a water district be concerned about the public's concerns when they're so transactional, and they're basically kissing up to the Trump fascist administration, and you can see that. And I'll have an article about coming out soon, where they invited Troy Edgar, who's the assistant director of the Department of Homeland Security, which is totally against everything that the Mets climate impact strategy purports to support. Totally has eviscerated anything about climate change from its website.
Yes.
Has eviscerated large parts of FEMA, which it also controls, and so on. And for talking about fires and so on here and all that. And lauded this guy in a dinner, a celebratory dinner. What great work he was doing. No tough questions, no feedback from the public, nothing. This is the agency that's managing our water. It's outrageous to me. It's just outrageous. That's what I'm,
I think that what's outrageous, John, is how comfortable there is a large segment of the population being hypocritical. I mean, at the end of the day, you know that you're a hypocrite just by looking at yourself in the mirror. Anybody, even Trump, has the ability to look at himself in the mirror and say, oh, I'm a hypocrite. But hypocrisy right now is a weapon that gives you power, allows you to not have shame in your actions. You don't have to apologize to anybody for any reason. You have no feedback loop to speak of, that you're accountable and that you're expected to look after the well-being of the common good. There is no notion of the common good anymore in this generation that is in charge and in power. And it's very sad because, I was born in Colombia. I was born in the Atlantic coast of Colombia. I was in Colombia during the late 60s when the U.S. Was invading Vietnam and dropping bombs. And obviously we didn't like the American intervention and massacre that was taking place. And then you remember 1968, the students in Paris they really rattled up. There's repression. The students in Mexico, they do their own rebellion and they get assassinated, a whole bunch of them. Then you go to the university here in the U.S. and there's some killings. And so now we have this apathy. Like you said, you refer to cowardice. It is, but it's mostly apathy. But at the same time, it's the fear that the people who have come into power, they're so willing to do whatever it takes for them to stay in position as well as continue to earn from the public good, so that they make it private good. And it's remarkable. It hasn't been seen before. My father used to be one that spoke about the U.S., how advanced, how honest, and then Nixon comes about. And so that kind of stops some of that honesty. But the difference now is that it's everywhere. And it's at the highest levels as well.
Well, we got rid of Nixon for a while anyways, and some reforms and all that. So there was at least that. But now it's, I mean, there's a lot of protests going on and all that, but it's going to take, it's so advanced that it's going to take a lot more than I'm glad they happened, the protests we had, but they've got to be like rolling national labor strikes and so on. That's what it's going to take, I think. And because the Democratic Party isn't going to do it. Some great Democrats, but the Democratic Party as a whole isn't going to do it. You know, they support a genocide in Gaza and all that too. That's not inspirational for dealing with fascism here. So they're not really. They're going to be, but that's another thing I'm working on.
At the local level, I wanted to ask you, in your experience, because this is the subject that we're in right now, which is so how will the community, what platform or what means is the community going to have to get the attention of those who make the decisions that they need to slow down, they need to stop, they need to reconsider, they need to, and I'm thinking back to Yolo County. Let kind of allow me that. And so let's say that the Board of Supervisors, just a little sidebar, this company that got the 5 wells permits, they really rushed this, and they already are pumping water. After these wells were permitted, one of the 2 agencies that had the responsibility to send the request for approval to the Board of Supervisors had almost like a second thought, because staff from that agency started to actually put forward and support a request from the concerned citizens that a moratorium should be put in place for new well permits until the county gets a good sense of what's going on. So they actually supported that. They presented that to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors approved a 45-day, which is kind of like the process and then in those 45 days, the concerned citizens put forward an hour analysis of what has been happening and why the moratorium should be extended. And the extension by law is no more than 10.5 months. And the agency, the Environmental Health Agency, actually supported it and put it forward to the Board of Supervisors based on the fact that they recognized that these new wells that were approved were not approved under the most or best science. Just to say that very faulty science models were used to justify that these wells were not going to impact adjacent wells, which is what they're required to do. And that because of that, they feel that we should have a moratorium, and they propose to the Board of Supervisors that a working group of the residents and landowners of the lands where these problems are, now they call it focus areas, and they used to be called areas of concern. Then this group over time is and should hopefully be able to put forward or bring some recommendations that will improve the well permitting process, make it more robust, so that wells don't get through the cracks, just like kind of what you were saying earlier. So the wells have been getting through the cracks here, literally. But my objection is that if the Board of Supervisors approve the extended moratorium based on the fact that the 4 wells that are now in the ground should not be in the ground, had these wells been reviewed under better, proper data. So those wells should have not been approved in the first place. Should not the county actually put a stop on the ability of those wells to drill, to pump water until there is clear data that says that those wells will not have the negative impact? Just recently, the groundwater agency estimated that there is a water deficit in this specific aquifer of 6,000 acre-feet of water per year. and this is a small area, so 6,000 acre-feet of water is a good amount of water. So they already know that they are on overdraft. And if they already know that they're on overdraft, why are they issuing new wells?
Right,
and
right.
There's this disconnect. Why do they issue new wells? Because they see an opportunity to open up more land to production, land that eventually could be encouraged to extend canals from their water source so that they can sell more water to new customers. So the conflict of interest is embedded in everyone who has a little leverage into this system.
They just keep sticking their foot through the door and getting just you get the cart before the horse or whatever. That's it's all. So there's always it's hard to undo. It's just like talking about. And for many years, they talked about the Poseidon Project in Huntington Beach as if it were a done deal,
right?
As if it were already approved, and it never had been approved.
Right.
And then, but the answer to that, really, the only answer is getting the public involved. Yeah. And it took 20 years or so. But in the case of Poseidon, that was all the money and interest and everything were for it. The Poseidon had, effectively bought off people, and the politicians and all those campaign contributions and so on. And the governor was totally for it. And Barbara Boxer, the former senator, was lobbying for it, and she was for it. And she, by the way, she knew nothing about the project hardly, but which is, anyways, that's another issue. I won't go into that.
Right.
So much, but when it came to that finally got to the final, they tried to mess with the Coastal Commission requirements all the time. But the public, starting at the local grassroots level, Residents for Responsible Desal is what it was called. Okay, that expanded and got advocates against the project throughout the state. Okay, nonprofits and so on joined forces. And when it got to in 2022, when it got to the final Coastal Commission hearing, it was unanimously voted down, despite they knew the governor. The governor, if he at the State Water Resources Control Board, regional boards, if you didn't vote how he wanted on a project, he'll get rid of you. He'll unappoint you, and he did that. He did that in this case, and so there was.
Was that Wilson?
I think that was the name. And
or Duke Major.
No, Blasingame. Blasingame was his last name. Blasingame. No. Governor Newsom. Yeah. Goodness. He kicked him off because he started asking questions there was no need demonstrated for this project, and that was required under environmental law in California. And they did not demonstrate that need for it. There's absolutely no need for it.
Okay.
And so it was a big boondoggle. There's so many things wrong with that. The price and everything, but the price of water. But when that got to the final hearing, it was packed. The opponents hardly even showed their faces, and the proponents hardly even showed their faces. And the main front man, Scott Maloney, for the Poseidon Project for many years, was so disliked. I think that's why they didn't let him speak, let somebody else speak. But everybody on that board, except one absent person, all 10 voting members up there voting emphatically no for that project. They defied the governor. They defied everything because the public outrage was there. It worked. It can still work, but it takes that grassroots, and you have to stick to it.
Yeah.
And so get to up in Yolo County, wherever it is, get to the applicable government meetings, public meetings, and show up. Yeah. And I even sometimes I show up when they were closed meetings too. You can sit around and stuff like that. Or some meetings where it's questionable whether they should let people in or not. I just go in. Okay. And then if you want to throw me out, go ahead. But then, then why are you so secretive about this and so on? So you've got to get tough with them, and you've got to show your power as public citizens. That's I guess my Ralph speech, but that's the way it has to be.
Yes, I think that that accountability has to be in your face.
Exactly. And that's another face to face.
Yes.
Video, which we advocated for at these
Yes.
meetings for people who couldn't come at the ridiculous times to have meetings, is good. It's good. But the most important thing is you have the right to confront petition your leaders. Yeah. To be there in person, and they should show up at the meeting so they can see you eye to eye. That makes a difference. It's like having a trial. You don't put your accusers or the accused at a distance. It's face to face. That's the thing.
I think that. Thank you. I really appreciate that you saying that. And one of the hopeful elements, just recently I attended Zoom because these meetings that I mentioned to you that the Environmental Health Department is putting forward with the residents or the local working group, they're using Zoom to let the public watch the meetings. And so I was watching that. And one of the things that is starting to permeate is that the farmers, the legacy farmers, the farmers whose family have been here forever, who already has a 15-year-old walnut orchard, is asking the question, so you're saying to me that you're going to start allocating water to my orchard and to the orchard of this Australian company that just bought these 1,000 acres, and we're going to get same amounts of water, and he just planted, and now I already have a farm in production. How are you going to go about that? What is the equity distribution? And so there was no answer, obviously, from the person who was speaking, because that is the question. But I think that the legacy farmers, for the first time just this year, have begun to see what some of the smaller organic growers that have been directly affected by the influx of new land and pumping are beginning to realize that this is not to be discounted because it's going to be too late by the time they have bought all the land. This Australian company, the name is Cobram, this year, they just created some kind of a funding effort to raise money to buy more land. So this company in Australia, they decided that California is their next big production area because it has water, because most likely they don't have much water over there in southern Australia. And so now they're raising money to buy more land. So what I think we need to make sure that the county understands is, hey, put a stop to these, and before you approve any new wells, you need to know what's happening to the aquifers and what's happening to the supply and the demand side and what's happening to the legacy farms. And also, because it's also transforming the culture of agriculture. When you bring in a company, they hire a management company and they send their workers and they just drive in and out. It's not like you have a farmhouse that is part of it's just plantation-like agriculture. And so to that extent, is not only the water or the ripping of the land, but it's the changing in the culture of the people who are stewards of the land.
Yeah, so it's heading towards a monopolization of all these resources too by fewer and fewer people and screwing everyone else. I would call them working class farmers or whatever, and so really what we need is, I think, something like a moratorium. Just that's it. And let's get a real plan. Let's have a real plan with accountability and so on. And I think that's throughout water management in California.
Yes.
Southern California, we got along just fine with allocations during the recent drought periods of, even 5 and 10%. And I think we got to give them two years to prepare, and we're gonna try 2 or 3 years. No imported water, Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, and if there are some areas where that isn't practical or couldn't be done, we could work that out. But basically, and let's get real. Let's get real, because we can get another. What is it? The Pacific Institute said in their studies, and I really respect that institute.
Yeah.
Did another 4 or 5 million acre feet, far more even than we actually would need, just through conservation efforts and wider use of the water. And then we have wastewater recycling, which is good and all that. And then that's what we got to do to get real. It's kind of like with fossil fuels. We've got to have that date, and Governor Newsom, and stick to it. Even though you want to be president, and now everybody is for big oil. Whatever. That's so you got to get serious about it, and that's what needs to be done. But they do. Everyone, they want to. Well, it's just like how we handle climate change the world over. Oh. There's some forward, and there's like 2 steps back or something. I mean, it's
It really is, the human element is lacking here.
Yeah.
It's quite a pleasure to meet you and to speak
Likewise.
with you, and I really respect your work.
Thank you. Likewise,
you've been in the trenches there, and it's years and years for you to create the spaces for people to be able to express themselves as well. And the job is not done. The good thing for this is that you have job security for the rest of your life, because these water wars are just going to be there.
I don't know if I call it security, but I have a job.